Hi, I'm Dr. Chad Thatcher, and this is another Chadventure. We're going to head out to the canyons.
Welcome to Grand Valley Magazine's Community in Motion film and video programs by Western Colorado's talented filmmakers. This series of short films, documentaries, and special programs showcases the dynamic life, landscape, and people of Western Colorado. Grand Valley Magazine's Community in Motion film and video programs are made possible through the generous support of our sponsors. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
This week's Grand Valley Magazine Community in Motion film and video series is sponsored by the Board and Buckle Ski and Cyclery in Grand Junction. Western Colorado is a world-class destination for outdoor adventure. For expert sales and service for skiing and cycling, the Board and Buckle has what you need to gear up this spring.
You don't have to be an expert to go canyoneering. Again, you need to go and look at the different scales there are, the different ratings, but some of the best canyons, and again, Little Wild Horse Canyon is an amazing example over in Goblin Valley. You can literally just walk it, and it'll get this narrow. It'll get so narrow, you can take your backpack, stick it sideways, put your camera on it, and take a whole family shot of everyone in there. It's amazing. But if you want to step it up a notch, there's always that too. And so you can start off nice and mellow, and then you start getting into what's more technical canyoneering. And so when you don't have any ropes or anything like this, it's just basically a big hike. Technically, I guess I can walk over here in this canyon and I can go canyoneering, right? That's a canyoneering trip. I guess you could also call rafting a canyoneering trip. That's a canyon on a river, right? But when you start getting into some of the narrow slot canyons, and I think that's what more people think of as traditional canyoneering, we are loaded with them. And you start getting into more technical stuff, that means you need ropes. And you need ropes to get down into the lower parts. And you need to really know what you're doing. I would say you just don't want to just take off into a canyon that has technical expertise that you need to have and then just jump into it. You should start off learning how to rappel. You should start off with the knowledge of how to use ropes, how to use a harness, how to use carabiners, what a moonter is, and how to back these systems up, how to build very bomber anchors is what we like to call them, anchors that are not going to go anywhere when you're hanging off of them. So yeah, there is some expertise that goes along with when you start getting into the upper ends of the canyons. But to start off with, there are plenty of canyons to do just to go explore with you and your family. There are courses you can take. You can actually go to Ouray, and San Juan Mountain Guides are fantastic at giving you the basics. You can go over to Moab, and there's plenty of outfitters there that will teach you the basics. You can also become part of the Canyoneering Association, and there are lessons there. You can go down to Zion National Park, and you can take 4 or 5 day courses on how to do this, and then once you come out the other end, you're good to go. You can also look at books. Books are amazing. They're a good resource. We live in an area here that you can go and practice. But I think the best way to do it is to go find other people that are doing this. Find other people that are canyoneering, or people that are rappelling, or go to a place where people are rock climbing. And people in general are pretty nice about introducing people to these sports. And you can start to tag along with them. Make some friends that like to do this, and surround yourself with the people that have the knowledge, and then start learning this. And I think I like to have that approach for almost anything in life. Guides are an amazing way to do that as well. So you surround yourself with guides, and it's amazing. You pay for a guide for one day, and you can learn knowledge that will pay dividends for the rest of your life. So I think they're a great resource. Okay, I'd say probably the biggest risk is driving to the canyon. That's probably the most dangerous thing we ever do on any daily adventure is the drive there. So once you get those logistics out of the way, once you get to the canyon, you should know how to use a map, how to use a compass, because getting lost in canyons is pretty, I know it seems kind of silly that you'd be lost in a canyon, but there's offshoots that go to them, and a lot of times the canyons are going to, you have to go overland and then drop into the right drainage, and you could go into a wrong drainage and end up in a completely different area. You need to take into account how long these are going to take, make sure you have the right food and water, particularly water. We live in the desert, and you're going to go through all kind of water, and the water you find in these canyons, boy, they can be pretty nasty. Little critters and stuff fall down inside of them, and it's pretty stagnant water, so you're not going to ever want to drink that stuff. So a lot of it's going to be based around what you would do for a common hike. Take that knowledge and put it into the canyon. So you're combining hiking and the ideas of using rock equipment, canyoneering equipment, things like ropes and harnesses, and combine those two, and you got your pretty good foundation what you need to do. So the idea of canyoneering being dangerous, like falling to your death, I never think about that. That's for sure. Particularly when we're going out with students, things like this. That's the last thing on my mind. You learn how to make anchors that will support people, and the gear today is amazing. You have ropes that will hold 5,000 pounds of force, and you're not going to create that kind of force. The gear out there today is tested to the umpteenth degree, and the carabiners, the harnesses, the ropes you use are very safe. Now, it does come down to human error, though. You can use them in a way that is not safe, and that's where you need to get the training and the expertise to use this stuff correctly. Oh, the best part of canyoneering is like any adventure. You're in the middle of nowhere. That's what adventuring is all about. Putting the cell phone down, getting out from away from the TV, and getting out into nature. And that's what we live here on Grand Junction. And when you're there in a canyon and you're surrounded by walls, some of them go 500 feet up, and they literally are this wide. I've actually been in canyons this wide, where I had to breathe in, and then breathe out to move a little bit. And when you're in those situations, you're not thinking about anything else. You're in the moment. And I think a lot of things about adventure is about letting go of the past and future and getting back to the now. And this happens all the time when you're doing adventuring, particularly when you're in canyons, because there's no place like canyons. They're just, you can go all over the world. And here in the Southwest, you have these slot canyons that you just don't find anywhere else. I keep going back to canyons because there's so many of them. Once you do one, you're kind of hooked. It's like doing rivers. You do a river and you're like, oh, I want to go this one. Or you do a mountain bike trail, like, oh, this was fun. I want to go to another one. And so the same thing happens in canyoneering. You do one, and now you're like, well, what's this one going to be like over here? Or wait, what's that canyon over there? And then you start kind of doing away with the guidebooks, and you start looking over at somebody and go, hey, I wonder what that'd be like. And you start going and exploring that stuff on your own. It's great. Well, some of the scariest moments I've had canyoneering, they weren't really scary. They were where you get into a situation where, wow, this is going to take a lot longer than I thought. And you start thinking about how prepared am I to spend the night overnight. It's going to get cold. The deserts get cold really quickly. And if you're out there in the spring or the fall, did I bring enough food? Did I bring enough water? And I've had situations where I thought an 8-hour canyon was just going to be an 8-hour canyon. And then you get down there and the directions are a little off. You get down there and you're in this area where your GPS isn't working because you're in a canyon. You can't get any satellite reception. And you have to really start putting some skills together to figure out how to get in or out of a canyon. A lot of times you go down a canyon and you'll go up another canyon, which is pretty fun. And it'll require some rock climbing. And you'll get to places where you're like, wow, this is a little tougher than I thought it was going to be. Or a rock fall has come in and it's a brand new deal. The other deal is canyoneering is when a storm happens. And this could probably be one of the scariest things. You don't really know what's going on up above canyon, upriver, I'd say. You're sitting there in a beautiful sunny environment, and then a flash flood can come in, and a flash flood can fill up a canyon in a matter of moments, and that can be some of the scariest involvements. So you really need to know the weather, and before you go out, you don't want to be going out in a situation where there could be a potential flash flood. So if it's not going to be a nice day, you could probably go do something else, or be in a canyon that is not prone to filling up as quickly. And that can be kind of a hard situation to figure out. You need to figure out where there could be potential areas you could evacuate the canyon. And again, getting stuck overnight can be pretty fun. I've come to a few canyons where I've had that, and it's just part of the adventure, though. Just make sure you bring enough food, enough water, and stick it out. And don't forget your headlamp either. One of the things I love about canyoneering is anticipating what's around the next corner. And canyons are not straight; they're fluvial. The rivers, they go back and forth, and so it seems like you're in this endless maze. And every corner opens up to a whole nother expanse. And sometimes it'll open up to this huge cavern, and you'll look down a little further, and all of a sudden, ooh, what's going on there? And it'll just get super narrow. And then you'll go over the top, and you'll find this massive pool. And you're like, okay, so you jump down in the pool. But when you jump in the pool, it can be very deep, and sometimes they're called keeper pools or keeper holes. And so you'll have to figure out how to jump into the pool and to get up and over the other side. And that's when you get to really use your brain. And that's when it's also nice to have a bunch of buddies. So before you jump in any pools, you want to know how deep they are and how you're going to get out of the other side. So that can be some of the more interesting things. And then once you get on the other side, you're like, oh, another pool, another pool, another pool. There's some amazing canyons in the San Rafael Swell where you can go from one keeper hole to another keeper hole to another keeper hole. And sometimes they're no big deal. They're not keeper holes because they're full of water and you can just swim right to the edge. But at other times, in the middle of August or maybe in late September where there hasn't been a lot of rain, they dry up. And so you get to the bottom of them, you have to figure out how to get out of the bottom, back up to the other side. So those can be some of the more interesting situations you get into, but they just lead to more adventure. Canyoneering on a more profound level is about exploring. And any of these adventures we do, it's about getting back to the essence of who we are as people. I think a lot of us, well, I say all of us are born explorers. From the moment we are born, we want to go out and explore the world. I have a 6-year-old daughter, Sage, and she is the ultimate teacher at learning and seeing how you can explore the world. They just want to go and just be out there using all their senses. And I think canyoneering is one of those sports that really gets back to that essence. Again, all adventures do this. They get back to this inner being, this inner childhood that I just want to step outside and get out there and see what things are about. I'm going to be using all my senses. I'm seeing things. I'm hearing things. Heck, sometimes I'm even tasting that rock, you know. We don't want to forget about our sense of taste. But we're getting back to the essence of exploring. And I think a lot of what happens in daily life, we get into this routine. And the routine starts channeling us away to some kind of normal, everyday routine. And this breaks that. And this gives us the idea like, okay, I'm not doing an everyday normal routine. I'm out here doing some exploring. And then hopefully you can bring this idea of exploring back to your everyday life. Because there are plenty of things to explore every single day in your life, but we just don't take those paths. We tend to just kind of doing the focus on the narrow and straight line, and here's all these amazing opportunities coming in from the right and left, and we don't take them. Canyoneering, you look at all these different canyons, and the second you start exploring and looking up and doing research, you're starting to get this idea, oh, I can go out there and I can do a different path, and I can choose this path. And then when you get on this path, you're in this canyon, you're like, all right, this is amazing. And then you're starting to think about the next canyon you're going to explore or the next adventure you're going to go do. And so on a deeper, more profound level, it's about exploring and getting back to the essence of who we are as beings. I mean, we have big brains, and we want to use these to get out there and see the world. You can canyoneer by yourself, or you can canyoneer with a team. I definitely prefer canyoneering with people. There's a lot of situations that can come about that you could get in some trouble, and it's nice to have a backup plan. If you do go by yourself, you should always let people know where you're going. If you go by yourself, you don't want to end up like Aaron Ralston in Blue John Canyon with a rock that's basically got your hand stuck, which is a real situation, and that can happen, as it did, obviously. But I like to go with a group of people to share the experience. I particularly like going out with students and showing them for the first time. I get a real high out of watching students' eyes open to new experiences. And when I see them going out there and learning the skills and then participating in a group and using the skills to get a group down it's basically an obstacle course. They're using skills that they're going to be using for the rest of their life. We don't live single-tarry lives. We are always in groups. And it's funny, a lot of our education takes us and we individualize everything. We take tests, separate. We sit in these individual desks at schools, which is the reality is when you get out of school, we do everything in groups. So I like to take these group situations and to use them as metaphors for the rest of your life. If you can get a group of people down a canyon, doing something back in your own environment that's very controlled is going to be very easy. And so I like more of the experience of groups. But does it mean I don't like to get out there by myself too? There's plenty of canyons right here in Colorado National Monument. I just like to put on a backpack, get some water, get a couple Snickers bar, and just head off into the canyons. But a lot of times I know those canyons really well. I'll let my wife know where I'm going, or someone else that cares about me if I don't show up. And I'll go out there and have a great time by myself. Sometimes you just do need to get out there into the solitude by yourself. And I don't tend to do the really technical canyons when I'm doing that. There's lots of environmental concerns with canyoneering. First of all, we're in a desert, and this ecosystem is very fragile. One of the biggest things you want to look for is don't step on the cryptobiotic soil. This is the glue of the desert. And one of the great things about canyoneering is you can alleviate a lot of that stuff by being in the riverbed. So the approach to a canyon can be one of the most technical parts as far as not leaving a footprint. But you can walk on hard surfaces, you can walk on the rocks, and then once you get into creek beds, which is what you're going to need to be in anyway, so these creek beds will eventually lead to the canyons, and so stay in the actual creek beds, and that will leave a much smaller footprint than before. Other things you want to be concerned about is if you're in areas that they don't want you to be bolting things, so that literally means taking a drill, drilling into the sandstone, which is what we have here, a lot of sandstone, and then putting a bolt on it. If you're in areas that they want you to use natural anchors and use rocks and tree branches and make things that are called deadmans, where you actually take a branch and you bury it into the sand and put a piece of webbing around it and use those kind of things. Other things you can do are to make sure the experience is as amazing as it was for you, is for the next people who are coming through. And so if you see any trash in there, the thing I like to do is bring a little bit of something to carry trash in. You just throw it in your backpack. You'd be amazed at the amount of trash you can find in some of these canyons. Plastic bottles, they don't go away. And don't think that you can just leave orange pills and bananas in these places. They just last forever. And then biggest thing, make sure you know how you're going to get rid of your number 2 job. You don't want to be leaving anything in these canyons. They are preserved for a long time. And they also are potential water sources for lots of things. And so I like to bring wag bags where you actually can do your job and you bring it out. So I like the idea of leaving no trace and packing in everything and packing out everything. You're one self-contained unit, and you're not going to leave anything but footprints in these canyons. One of the great things about deserts, when you spend a lot of time in them, you really get a sense of how much life is in these areas. And when you're in canyons, this is the funnel for water. And water is the essence of life, particularly in these deserts. And so you'll be in these desert environments, and you'll be walking along a canyon, and all of a sudden there's this huge, glorious tree right in the middle of it, and it has some kind of water source that's going through there. And you start to get a real idea of how much life is in these canyons. I was in Grand Gulch, which is down in the border of Arizona and Utah. And we were cruising through this canyon, and I had about 7 or 8 people with me at the time, and we were in mud up to our knees, and all of a sudden a deer comes trotting out of the middle of nowhere, comes right up to us and passes us. We had probably about 3 feet on either side of us, and just cruised right out. And you're like, wow, there's life out here. There's a lot of it. And the deserts are full of this. One of the things I also like to see is all the little critters. And so when you're in these canyons, a lot of times your world is shrunk into this microcosm of a canyon. You don't have the big expansive views you do. And so you start to concentrate on a lot of the smaller items. There's bugs down there. When you get down to some of the pools, you'll see tadpoles and all kind of critters that are living in these pools, and you're thinking, wow, you just add a little bit of water and then life just flourishes. So canyoneering responsibly is going in with the idea that I'm going to leave no trace, which is a very common term these days. You're going to walk on durable surfaces. You're not going to ruin the cryptobiotic soil. You're going to pack in everything and pack out everything, and that includes your number 2 if you have to do that. Canyoneering has a history in the mountaineering world, in the climbing world, and in the river world. And I think it's started in those areas. And people got together, and you can start looking at the history of it and go back to, the old outlaws. If you go back to some of these places in Utah, these were the old hangout zones You go in the canyons, and those were places you'd hide. And you can go down there today, and you can see how, wow, this would be the most amazing place if I just got through robbing a terrain. I'm going to go hang out here for a few days, and no one's going to find you. But the history of it, as far as canyoneering as a sport, I'd say it's relatively recent. It took the collective knowledge of climbers and people that like to rappel and hike, and they put all this knowledge together, and they started going exploring the canyons. And I'm not sure when the year was. Could look that up though. The way it's changed is probably more due to technology. The ropes are better, lighter weight gear. There's actual technical canyoneering gear like backpacks. So when you go into a pool and you start walking out of the pool, so in the old days you had this huge backpack full of water now, and now they have drain systems. There's ropes that you can use that coil up your rope really easily, and you can throw them, and it comes out like a throw bag. And I think it's a lot from rafting technology, taking throw bags and throwing them, and everything comes out nice and coiled. And then when you go down there, you just recoil your rope and you go on down. You're taking a lot of the technology from the climbing world and you're applying it. So rappel devices are a lot nicer. Carabiners, I think one of the greatest inventions ever. Those are making life easy out there. You can quickly attach to anchor points. You can use that gear to attach an ATC, which is a belay device, or a figure 8 to your rope. So I'd say the gear is probably the biggest change that you've seen in canyoneering, because the canyons don't change. New canyoneers need to know what they're getting into. And like I said, let's start off on something nice and simple. Head into something that's non-technical, and doesn't mean you're not going to have fun. You're going to get in there, and canyons are magical places. And start off with something that's fairly simple, something that doesn't require a lot of gear. Doesn't mean you can't get into some areas that require swimming, because everyone knows how to swim. Well, most people do, at least. But you can get to some very interesting canyons. One of my favorite ones is in Zion National Park, called Subway, and that has a river flowing right through it, and you can get in there and you go on some of the longest, coldest swims you can imagine. So if you get in some of those areas, remember, bring your wetsuit. Even on those hottest days, 100 degrees outside, and you're thinking, oh, I'm not going to be needing a wetsuit. You get in those canyons, there's no light whatsoever, and those pools down there are very cold. They can be quite refreshing, but when you're doing a 100-yard swim, they can get pretty cold pretty quickly. There are plenty of opportunities to get into the sport. There are people that are specially trained. AMGA Guide, the American Mountain Guide Association. You can look up online and just do an AMGA search and see if there are people in the local area around Grand Junction, around Ouray. You can go over to Moab, and there's plenty of professional guides that can get you into the sport. Another way you can learn how to get into these sports, and I think one of the great aspects at Colorado Mesa University is we have an outdoor program, and there we have all the gear and plenty of students that have the knowledge on how to teach this. And to take that a step further, if you think about it, there should be no obstacles into getting into canyoneering. Matter of fact, there should be no obstacles at all into getting into adventure. And I like to consider myself the excuse killer. If you guys have any ideas that are keeping you from getting out there, please come by the outdoor program and I'll lead you in the right direction. Matter of fact, I think we should have outdoor programs everywhere. We should have them for cities, we should have them for every school, starting from kindergarten all the way to high school, so that these kind of questions don't ever come up. My job is to get students out of the classroom and into the real world. I want them to become empowered, to have their own adventures, and to take these adventures to new levels. That's my job in a nutshell. The goal of students in my program and in the outdoor program is to give them the tools to make informed decisions about their adventures and for them to think big. These days, I do think that people think kind of inside the box, and we have all kind of issues that are coming into our world. Lots of issues. Our world's constantly changing, and we need students that can think outside the box. We need creative minds, and I think a lot of what the outdoor program does, and one of my main goals, is to teach students how to think in new and creative ways. A lot of what we have been taught is very conformed, and I want to break that conformity. I want to break down the walls. And one of the big goals is for them to think bigger than they ever thought before, and to give them the tools to do that. I like to do adventures all around the world, but I really feel like I could live anywhere. And I choose to live in Grand Junction, Colorado, because look at this place. I mean, we live in the mecca of outdoor adventure. And one of the great sports you can do here is go canyoneering. And canyoneering is one of my favorite sports because it involves rock climbing, hiking, river rafting gear, the same gear you use for skiing, your polypropylene you're going to be using out there. You're going to be taking things like your wetsuit booties because it's going to be cold. You know, you go pull those on, you put them inside your tennis shoes, and now that's going to keep you warm. It combines all these amazing sports into one. And then the best part is you're in a canyon, and there's no cooler place in the canyon. Between Moab, Grand Junction, all the way down to Zion National Park in Utah, and everything in between, we live in this amazing area that's called the Colorado Plateau, and it's full of sandstone. And every time it rains, it takes a little bit of that sandstone and etches away these beautiful canyons. So how do you know where the canyons are? Just look them up. You can Google Canyoneering Utah anytime and figure out where to go. There are great websites out there that will literally list the canyons. They give rating scales. They'll talk about how to assess the rating scales and what those mean. There's also guidebooks out there. There are guidebooks that are specific for San Rafael Swell, Zion, the areas around here. So there's plenty of information. We live in the information technology age, so there is no excuse for not finding a suitable canyon for you. Just Google it. If I could go canyoneering anywhere I wanted, one of the best places is the San Rafael Swell. It's only a couple of hours away, and there are literally hundreds of canyons to go explore. I've explored a fraction of them, and I like going out there because the solitude is amazing. No one's out there. Between here, Grand Junction, and Salt Lake, there's just nothing but open space out there to go explore. And so, if you were to ask me where I'd like to go to San Rafael Swell.